It's me, Mario! Hello!
1996 was a big year for gaming as a whole. The PlayStation got a lot of popular titles that year like Tomb Raider, Mega Man 8, Resident Evil, Parappa the Rappa, and most notably, Crash Bandicoot. The PC also received a few great titles that year like Quake, Elder Scrolls 2, Diablo, Duke Nukem 3D, and Command & Conquer Red Alert. However, Nintendo fans would get the most out of 1996 with the release of the Nintendo 64 alongside its two release titles, Pilot Wing 64, and the game we'll be taking a look at today, Super Mario 64. The story of this game is a long one, so here's the sum up. Shigeru Miyamoto thought up the idea of Mario 64 during development of Star Fox, though the Super Nintendo wasn't powerful enough to make his idea, work. So Miyamoto made sure the next console Nintendo made would be capable of making his idea happen. And after 3 years of development, Mario 64, along with the Nintendo 64, were finished. When the game released, it was heavily praised and it was one of the best-selling games on the Nintendo 64, selling nearly 12 million copies. In recent years, however, it's shown its age. Not to say it's bad now by any means, it's still fun to play, spoiler alert for the video. However, because all of the 3D Mario games after 64 built so much on the foundation, Super Mario 64 just feels a little lacking or even archaic in comparison. So, is Mario 64 really as outdated as people say? Well, let's see how much of that is true. This is Super Mario 64, let's review. The story starts out with Princess Peach inviting Mario to have some cake at her castle. Mario, thinking cake for lunch sounds freaking amazing, goes to the castle where he strangely meets up with a reporter/cameraman, or Koopa in this instance. Going inside the castle, something is immediately wrong. When you enter the castle, the princess and the cake is nowhere to be seen. As it turns out, Bowser decided instead of just kidnapping the princess like usual, he takes the whole castle hostage. So as Mario, you go through different rooms through paintings to get power stars to make your way through the castle to defeat Bowser and save the princess. So besides the whole, taking the whole castle thing this time, and thinking on it won't be the last time he actually does this, it's a pretty standard Mario story. Taking a look at the graphics, it actually looks pretty decent for a release title on the N64. While it's not as good looking as titles on the PlayStation from that year, it still looks bright and colorful as a Mario game should. If I had to pick the best looking map of the game, I'd go with the main hub, the castle. It's the best looking map as a whole, and it feels like a place you could actually live in. Though, to name a few other standouts, the city part of Wet Dry World does something similar to the castle, Tick-Tock Clock looks unique compared to the other levels with their usual themes, Jolly Roger Bay has a ship that rises from the depths after the first star, and the slide in Tall Tall Mountain is probably the best looking slide section in the game. If I had to make a few nitpicks, it's pretty obvious when something is a 2D object and not a 3D one, and I'm not just talking about the coins. Another thing to mention is that objects tend to disappear and reappear on screen depending on how far you are from the object. And for the case of the original N64 version, the frame rate tends to drop down in certain places of the game, though it's not a big deal most of the time, and this again only appears in the N64 original. Overall, not a great looking game, but certainly not a bad looking one either. Taking a look at the audio, and there's not much to say for the sound effects or voice lines. Really, they sound perfectly fine, at least to me. The music, on the other hand, sounds as you would expect it to sound for a Mario game soundtrack. Upbeat, atmospheric, and of course, catchy. If I had to name 3 of my favorite tracks in the game, I would go with the Water Levels theme, Koopa's Road, and the staff roll music. All 3 are just really good at getting to the emotions in my opinion. I only really have one complaint. The tracks have a tendency to get reused over and over again, which isn't a big deal if they're reusing a repeated level theme, but I would like to see a few more tracks for some of the other levels. Still though, even though it can get a little repetitive, the music is still good to listen to. The last thing to look at is gameplay. Super Mario 64 is considered a collectathon platformer, in which you are completing platforming challenges to collect a certain number of items to progress. The main items you collect are stars. Getting stars requires you to complete challenges, collect a certain amount of items, or just find them sitting in a place that's hard to get to. A minor criticism I have with collecting stars is you can only pick up one at a time. Most of the time it's not a big deal, but it does get a little annoying when there's multiple stars to grab at once. Thankfully, stars in the Bowser stages and the 100 coin stars are the only stars that don't kick you from the level, which makes dealing with them a little easier. The levels in Mario 64 are generally well designed for the most part, and especially around Mario's controls. Not to say they're bad by any means, but they may require some getting used to, especially if you're playing ports or emulators. The controls were made with the N64's controller in mind, so trying to do basic movements or tricks might be a little difficult. Getting back to the controls, they work just fine with two exceptions. Wall jumping is strict on the timing, and turning isn't always consistent. Mario either turns in an instant or moves in a circle, which can sometimes make you fall off a ledge. Apparently, Mario doing these turns depends on how fast you move the stick. Still though, turning could have been handled a little better in my opinion. At the same time though, these two exceptions don't really hurt the game too much, it just requires some getting used to. Going back to the levels, there's 15 levels, 3 Bowser levels, and a handful of secret levels within the castle. The main levels are all open world sandboxes that can be completed in almost any order with 6 selectable stars to get, and a 100 coin star, which are stars that can be gotten by getting 100 coins. These stars challenge your knowledge of the levels, however, these stars are also the hardest stars to get in the game due to a couple of reasons. 1. You aren't told about these stars unless you talk to a specific toad, or you already knew about them beforehand. 2. Some levels barely have more than 100 coins. 3. Sometimes you'll enter areas you can't get out of where you won't have enough coins. And 4. If you die, which is common if you're not careful, you have to collect all the coins all over again. The one level that probably has the worst 100 coin star to get is Tick-Tock Clock. This level is also my least favorite level in the game. It features all the game's problems that I mentioned so far, plus an annoying level gimmick and crappy camera placement. While the camera was never perfect in my opinion, it was never really a problem until this level. Of course, I don't absolutely hate Tick-Tock Clock as much as I made it sound. Rainbow Ride has similar problems and I actually like that level. But for the first time player, the level will get frustrating to say the least. Also, going back to the 100 coin star, you have to be careful where you get your last coin. The star will spawn right above where you collected the 100th coin. So just a quick tip for getting 100 coin stars, just be careful and take your time. Or just ignore them, you only need 70 stars to beat the game anyways, and the levels were more fun when I didn't need to worry about them. Looking at the other levels, the Bowser levels are linear courses that end with a boss fight with Bowser. These levels and almost all of the secret levels have only one star, that being a red coin star. These stages are usually a nice change of pace since all these levels require you to do is reach the end. Something similar could be said for most of the secret levels as well. The secret levels usually involves a gimmick of some kind like swimming in a fish tank or racing the time for a secret star. Overall, while I like some levels more than others, I still had fun with my least favorite ones, especially when I wasn't dealing with 100 coin stars. Real quick, taking a look at the bosses, they're all pretty easy, except for the final Bowser fight. That fight in my opinion can just take a long time because the last throw requires you to throw him from a distance, and timing your throws is kind of hard to do in general. However, with enough patience, you are able to blast them up and win the game. Speaking of which, let's talk about the ending. After Bowser is defeated, he vanishes off leaving behind a star. Mario grabs the star and flies off to the castle where he meets up with a released Princess Peach. The day is saved, you had a great adventure, and Mario finally gets some cake. And that's basically it for the game, unless you got all 120 stars. Then you can go back to your saved game where the cannon outside the castle is now unlocked, where you can shoot yourself up onto the roof. On the roof, Yoshi makes a quick cameo and gives you a message from the devs at Nintendo. After that, you get 100 lives and a triple jump that allows you to fall from any height without taking damage. You also get access to the wing cap, so you can just go and fly around in the courtyard. Oh crap, I forgot the power-ups, didn't I? So quick round here. There are 3 power-ups. The wing cap allows you to fly, the invisibility cap allows you to pass through walls and enemies, and the metal cap makes you heavy and invincible to certain hazards. All of them have their ups and downs that are pretty fun to use. Well, that's about it for the game. So what do I think about Super Mario 64 as a whole? Well, I think it's not as outdated as people may think. The graphics may be outdated, but it's still charming. The audio is done well, and the music is good too. The story is simple, but it's Mario. It doesn't need to be complex. And while the game has some problems, it's still fun to play to see how fast you can get stars. If I had to rate it from a 1 to 5, I'd give it a 3.5. There's clearly some things that need to be improved, but they're still fun to have nonetheless. If you like to play Super Mario 64, you can find it on the Nintendo Switch online service or find a copy of the 3D All-Stars port. But personally, I'd recommend Super Mario 64 Plus. It's basically a source port that introduces a lot of improvements to the original and adds other things to make the game better. It's actually what I used to get clips for this video. And it even adds Luigi. Oh, well, never mind. Well, that's all for this review, folks. Thanks for watching. This has been the Happy Son.